Greetings, my name is Pete Ring. My background is in military aviation and in particular fighters and choppers. I do these chats on behalf of Air Force Association New South Wales and on behalf of Wings magazine and also for our Wings Australia YouTube channel. Could I also ask that if you like our videos, then please subscribe to our channel and have a look at the description on our channel for this video, and you'll find links to subscribing to our magazine called Wings and subscribing to Air Force Association New South Wales. Today I want to welcome John Kindler, who's a well-known fighter pilot.
Hi, Pete.
We're going to talk about some rather unique occurrences that happened to you, and probably hasn't happened to anyone else in that sense. So that's where we're headed. How long were you flying Mirages for?
From 1971 to 1983.
Right.
Yeah. So 12 years, more or less.
Long time.
And I spent a bit of time in that time. I spent 4.5 years at RDU flying all sorts of aeroplanes, including the Mirage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you go into F-18s?
Yes, I did. I was the first CO of 77 Squadron with the Hornets.
Well, that was pretty damn nice, I think, because I've heard a lot about the F-18. It sounds like a very, very nice aeroplane, totally different to the Mirage, which was a nice aeroplane in its own right. But so what happened to you that was rather unique in the event of Mirage flying?
Well, 2 ejections probably is the unique bit. The first one was in southern Malaysia. We're flying out of Singapore, Tengah. The second one was off the coast of Nara. We're flying from Williamtown, of course, and that was on the occasion of the first fleet support mission following the cancellation of the carriers and the decision to buy Hornets.
Right.
And the 2 experiences were quite different. The first time I landed in the side of a rubber plantation. The second time I landed 90 nautical miles out to sea off the coast of Nara. Quite a different experience in every respect. The ejection itself is, everybody knows the sequence and what happens. But
what happened in the first one that caused you to eject?
Well, the first one, we were doing a split strike on a clay pipe factory in southern Malaysia, having got airborne out of Singapore. We started with 4 aircraft. There were only 2 of us left. And it was just before the RV point that I was actually looking out to the left for the other Mirage when the firelight caution came on. Shortly after, the pitch and yaw dampers popping. I had looked down at the pitch and yaw dampers and thought, well, they're not so important. Kept looking for my mate. Tried to reset the pitch and yaw damper. At this stage, I started climbing a little bit. Didn't want to stay close to the ground, sorting these problems out, especially the firelight. But there were no other indications. But it was unusual to have 2 problems like that. Like I've experienced in my life of flying, no real emergency is ever like the emergencies described in the emergency section of the flight manual, because multiple things can happen at the same time. So I turned south. The other Mirage joined on my left, and I could see him, and we were talking to one another on the secondary radio, which we called the red set. UHF radio. I was telling him what was happening as I turned towards the Malacca Straits. This is all before we've joined up and we're heading towards the Malacca Straits in case I have to eject. Starting a gradual climb. Initially on the power I had set for the cruise, I selected mill power for the climb and away we went. But as I rolled out of the turn onto a southwesterly heading, I noticed the bijou ball and the PHI.
What's the bijou ball, John?
The bijou ball was that one of the fantastic instruments in the Mirage. I've never seen anything like it. It was a representation of the world in a globe shape, a round ball with 3 dimensions, and you basically flew attitude by that.
Wow.
Of course, used the other instruments for performance, but it was a great instrument. I must admit, I probably, like most Mirage guys, we relied on it far too much. But we did have a standby instrument.
So you were saying you noticed that the bijou ball. What had happened to it?
Yeah, I'd done about a 40-degree bank turn to the right on a southwesterly heading.
Yeah.
And when I rolled out wings level, the bijou ball maintained 40 degrees of bank and was frozen on the heading. It also had a heading, it rotated with your heading, and the PHI was the navigation instrument that gave you range and distance to the next waypoint or your TACAN station.
Someone told me that the PHI stood for pure horse dust indicator.
That was the regular name for it, yes, because it wasn't very accurate, but it usually get you in the right country and sometimes even in the right state. Anyway, I noticed they had frozen. I didn't realize at this stage, but I was chatting to my wingman now and on the back radio, and he then, after the mission, during the debrief, established he didn't hear me anymore. And he came up on the main radio and said, "I'm not hearing what you're saying." I told him that I was just climbing, that my bijou ball and PHI had frozen. I had checked my inverter to see whether the power was being supplied to the pitch and yaw damper by pressing the press to test button on the inverter, and the needles would drop, and release the button, the needles will go up. That indicated you had power to the fuel gauge.
Right.
So theoretically I had power, but the pitch and yaw dampers wouldn't re-engage.
Oh.
So as I'm climbing away, I'm looking for symptoms of any other symptoms. Nothing for quite a while, until I started to hear a thump from the back of the aeroplane, and my stick started jerking to the left. The engine fire light went out and the afterburner fire light came on, which was another indication that things were working the way they're supposed to work. I had done a press to test on the fire lights, which is something you never do when everything's normal. But I realized things weren't normal. The engine fire light stayed on after the 3 or 4 seconds of the test cycle, and the AB fire light went out. But now the engine fire light went out and the AB fire light came on as all these other things were happening, thumps and so on.
Oh.
I looked in the rear vision mirror and I could see sheets of flame coming out of the left wing root, trailing behind the aeroplane, of course. I couldn't see how far. So I was ready to eject I had briefed myself to use the top handle. And amazing how I got stuck with the top handle. You probably could have used the bottom handle just as well. But as I went to reach for the top handle, the aeroplane was jerking, the stick was jerking to the left, and the aircraft wanted to roll to the left. So I waved my wingman away, afraid that I might eject straight into him when I get out of the cockpit. So he moved away a bit. I brought my legs back to keep the stick between my knees so that the aircraft stayed wings level during the initial part of the ejection, which it did. The stupid thing about that was, of course, I didn't realize until after the ejection, as the seat fired, my legs were not flush on the seat. And I've since read about people who broke their legs doing things like that.
Mm.
Well, I was lucky my legs didn't break, and away I went. You know, the canopy went first, and then a second later.
Just to interrupt for a minute, did you have any, when you pulled the handle on the top handle, the blind on the seat, and over your head and over your face,
Yep.
did everything happen pretty quick at the stage as far as the seat actioning?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the canopy went straight away.
Yeah.
You know, as soon as I pulled the handle, I could see underneath the blind of the handle, I could see what my speed was, and it was about 350 knots.
What height were you?
About 4,000 or 5,000 feet. I can't
Okay.
remember exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
But we had climbed for quite a while.
Yeah.
The first thing that happened when the canopy went was amazing how much rubbish was blowing around inside the cockpit. You know, there were bits and pieces, dust and rubbish. I don't know where they came from, but obviously inside. And then I went, and the jolt was quite significant. You know, like a serious bang. And I know I blacked out, but I was conscious of what happened. The G just, I blacked out. I felt like I was tumbling, but according to my wingman, the seat went straight up the rail. The little parachute deployed to stabilize the seat, and my feet stayed flying in the direction of flight the whole time. But I felt like I was tumbling. When it didn't take long before the seat I separated from the seat, and that also pulls out the main chute, and everything happens at once. But when that happened, my helmet came off, and I felt like I was when the main chute opened, that my head moved forward. But what had actually happened was the personal equipment connector, which is the oxy hose, the G suit, and the RT lead, was on the left-hand side of the ejection seat. It did not automatically disconnect when the seat disconnected, when the seat harness disconnected. So the seat went, weighing quite a few kilos, and it just ripped my helmet off at the same time. And the shock of the parachute opening at 350 knots or so was very noticeable for a second or two. And I immediately, as soon as I looked down, I could see the aeroplane was actually in a left-hand spiral dive heading for the ground.
And how does that impact on you? You can see your own aeroplane flying away.
Well, I suppose you could say it was what I expected to see. The aeroplane was on fire. In fact, the sheets of flame were at least as long as the aeroplane itself.
Wow.
Coming out the back. I looked for my wingman, couldn't see him. He was obviously, I'd say, above me and way out to the left or behind me as well. And so I just watched the aeroplane go down for a while, but I was rotating in the parachute a little bit, so I lost where it went. I could see I was going to land in what looked like a forest, so I kept the dinghy pack attached to my backside for all the obvious reasons. I didn't want to stick up my backside. And I waited to get closer to the ground. I rotated the buckle on the harness, ready to punch the buckle and fall out of the seat if I was in the tree or whatever. But none of that happened. I actually landed on the ground, left foot first, it turned out, but actually I landed on the top of a crater, like quite a big crater. It looked like someone had gel-ignited some trees out of the ground and left a big round crater. And my left leg landed on the top of the crater. My left leg went down the crater, and my dinghy pack was caught between my thigh and my lower leg and my left knee. I had a sudden sharp pain, which kind of threw me down into the bottom of the crater. at that stage, I undid the parachute harness, and crawled up the crater, which wasn't very steep. It was only
How
about
did the parachute come away easily, did it?
Yeah, look, it had, there was a little bit of a breeze, but it was not a problem.
Yeah.
I just undid the buckle, took the straps off, and all I had was the dinghy pack on myself, and of course the LPU. I climbed up. I found the parachute was just lying on the ground right next to the crater. I got the parachute and lay it out on the ground so it could be seen from the air, because it had gone into a stream shape. So I just opened it up into a half circle. And I got the radio out to talk to my wingman, but on 243, but I didn't talk to him. I knew from listening to the primary frequency before I ejected that a helicopter out of Tenga, a number 3 squadron RAAF helicopter, was doing circuits, and he was flying towards my direction.
Wow.
I don't know how long it took, 5-10 minutes before I could hear the waka waka waka.
Wow.
And I turned my PRC 9, I had the PRC 90 on and called him on 243 megahertz. He replied, he said he's not far away. Of course, he didn't have any range, but luckily he had an NDB that showed him the direction towards my position based on my transmission. So he came straight towards me. I told him, you're 500 feet away, 300 feet, 200 feet. He picked up the parachute. He landed in what was a clearing of low shrubs. They're about 3 feet tall, 3-4 feet tall shrubs. I packed up my parachute.
How are you feeling at that stage?
No pain whatsoever. I'm feeling pretty good, actually.
Your morale's rising as the helicopter came down, I guess.
I think the adrenaline was pumping overtime.
Yeah.
I was feeling quite fine.
Yeah.
I mean, I felt no pain at that stage. I got it. The crewman came out and helped me with the parachute. We got in, and I was back at Tenga within 15 minutes. Once he picked me up, he dropped me at the flight line at Tenga, and we went to the crew room and had a glass of bubbly. After a while,
the doctors would have been horrified.
Well, they were actually, because after a while, the ops telephone rang, and some irate doctor at the other end said, "Where's the ejectee? We're supposed to bring him straight to medical." They had actually, where they dropped me was on the 3 squadron flight line, but a short walk to medical in Tenga.
Yeah.
So anyway, I went and saw the doctor. He wasn't a happy chappy, but I told him I was happy, and that was the main. That was, as far as I'm concerned, the main thing for the day.
Yeah, my word.
So he then arranged for X-rays for the next day, and he gave me a look over, checked my back, my arms, my legs. I didn't notice until I got out of my flying suit later that afternoon that I had a big red mark in the groin on both thighs from the parachute harness. And I also had zipper cuts on my chest, where my chin, and on my chin, where when the helmet came off, it pulled my head down onto my chest. And of course I had one of those old Poplin light green flying suits with a zipper. And I got zipper marks on my chin and on my chest from my head impacting my chest.
Wow.
I didn't see that until that night. Apart from that, really at that stage, I didn't feel badly at all. I felt, pretty all right. Maybe a little bit.
Did you get shaky at any stage?
No, not at all. No,
wow.
no. the adrenaline must have worked off my shock, and I was, and the champagne, of course, or what, bubbly, whatever it was. That helped. Yeah, that helped a lot.
So
Needless
that
to
was
say,
better than a sedative, I think.
the best sedative, I reckon. Yeah. So
So,
that,
so reflecting on that, to you, was almost happened as advertised in the flight manual and all the documentation.
exactly, except for, the emergency, the problem, which wasn't really in any way sense or described in the flight manual, but of course you wouldn't expect it to be. But everything worked as it was supposed to work,
Yeah.
except for the seat separation. I probably could have slowed down a bit, but I didn't think about slowing down. 400 knots was almost stall speed in the Mirage. Rarely just went slower than 400 knots unless you're doing 1v1 ACT.
I suppose people should know that anything below about 240 knots, the Mirage didn't fly that well.
It got very sluggish and very slow, and the elevons turned into rudders. If you rolled to one side, the aircraft yawed in the same direction. So
Now, what are the elevons for people who?
well, the Mirage had no flaps, of course, and no leading edge flaps. It just had big flying surfaces at the back of the wing, from the wing root up to the wing tip, and they worked together, of course, with the stick. As when you pulled the stick back, they came up. If you rolled the aeroplane, they were the primary roll control surface, like ailerons on a normal aeroplane. And of course, you had a rudder, which was very rarely used unless you're flying slow speed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
And really,
go on.
I was going to say the pitch and yaw dampers, as I learned in later years, they didn't have much of an effect on the aeroplane. You could actually fly quite safely without them. It was more in transonic and during the transonic deceleration that they would help you alleviate the PIO. But other than that, the aeroplane was quite stable in pitch and yaw.
Yes.
At normal flying speeds.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you when did you when was your next flight after the ejection?
Well, the next flight was the next afternoon. Three squadron had been in Tenga for 2 months, May and June. My wife had delivered our first child, a daughter, on the 4th of June, and I was not allowed to go home. I stayed in Singapore.
Wow.
They were the rules in those days. A bit. Anyway, that was another story. I went home on I think it was the 6th of July, the day after the ejection, having had X-rays out at Changi Hospital, because the doctor out there had experienced many ejections, and he X-rayed me from top to bottom, front and back, countless times. I don't know. I reckon I would have glowed in the dark after all that. But then I flew back in. I flew one of the Mirages back the next day.
So you actually flew not a dual, a single seat Mirage back next day.
Yeah, I flew a single back, and Narelle, who was still smarting from cesarean section, and we both, after I saw her, we both went home. We went to the mess for the officers' mess ball of the year. We only stayed a couple of hours because my groin was very seriously hurting at that stage, and she was hurting as well. But anyway, we went, enjoyed the ball.
Wow, that's amazing, mate. Did you have any, like I had a big crash in my life, which I'm not going to cover now, but I know what it felt like when I was about to get airborne a week or 3 later. Did you have any, did it change your attention to your aeroplane systems, or to the way you're strapped in, or to any aspect of your routine flying operations? Did it change your view on anything?
I don't think so, Pete. I can't remember, of course, how exactly I felt at the time, other than I was sore from the ejection. But no, I mean, I flew back happily the next day. in formation with 5 other guys.
Good on you.
Because we used to, when the squadrons exchange, we bring our aeroplanes back. They would fly down as we were flying north, so that Tenga was never without aeroplanes from the Royal Australian Air Force. I felt okay flying, but and the next week into the normal flying program, no problem. Yeah, that was good.
That was it was a very notable and very I suppose stressful to some degree experience. But on the other hand, as you said before, the seat and the ejection process worked as you would expect it to work, except for that, except for your helmet being pulled off.
Yeah. No, everything worked as predicted. Everything worked as I expected. There are a few lumps and bumps, but apart from that, everything was good.
So if you had to brief the bog rats in the squadron at that stage, maybe you were a bog rat at that stage, but
I was. I think I'd only been promoted the year before to flying officer, so I remember a couple of pilot officers. We used to have the pilot officer union in the officers' mess, and we had our own table. Get rid of all those senior flight lieutenants who thought they were God's gift to the universe.
So did that? We'll get on to the second one in a minute. Did that influence the way you thought about ejection seats after that? Because I could think about ejection seats, but having never used one, my thoughts are out of the book. But did that influence the way your trust or your relationship in a way with ejection seats after that?
I don't think so. Because at the end of that, year, I flew for another year in Malaysia, quite happily continuing. I never changed my attitude towards ejection seats. Okay. If there was a problem in the aeroplane, I was going to get out. I was going to save my backside.
That's good anyway.
Yeah, and I knew they worked, so that maintained my confidence in the seat. I had heard of other ejections where people were concerned whether the seat was working or not.
Yes.
You and I probably know who we're talking about here.
Yes.
So, no, I had full confidence in the seat. I was a little bit sore. My wife reckons I shrunk in height by about a centimetre, which is quite possible, I suppose.
Is possible, yeah.
Yeah. We did measure me, and I was a little bit shorter than I was a couple of years ago before when we were married. But apart from that, no, I enjoyed flying, and I really kept going for the rest of my life.
Until what year again was the ejection you just spoke of?
That was in July 1972.
If you've enjoyed this chat, then please subscribe to our channel. Our channel supports veterans directly and indirectly. We are all volunteers. Additionally, if you go to the description of this particular video, you'll see links to the Australian Military Aviation History Association and links to Air Force Association New South Wales, and you'll see the subscription button to subscribe to our premium aviation magazine.